All right, I'm live again. Boy, I'd be probably rich if if I could make money just talking. This one, I call this one here like Simon the Magus or whatever. And this is I got this here. This is a CBD oil. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. I'm a hyper nervous person, but I drink coffee. So here we have two different things. We've got CBD comes from cannabis. You know, we've got coffee. It comes from coffee beans. There's all kinds of crazy things that do people. And that, believe me, I will tie this back in with Jesus, and we'll get to the main topic here, which is Simon the Magus. That we read about in the Bible or whatever. Because I want to bring everything back to Christ or whatever. At this point, when we're talking about Simon the Magus, he was in the city and he was doing all this magic and everything, all these illusions for everybody, and everybody in town loved him. He was probably a great guy. But part of magic, when you realize the magic and what magic is or whatever, it's illusion, it's deceit, it's what we would call like left-handed, like a left-handed path or something like that. Now Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is the doorway, the sheepfold, the gate, the path, and it lays right in the center of things. I'm kind of a left-handed person because I even though I use my right hand, I'm using the left side of my brain or whatever. But like all these, everything's got a good and a bad purpose for it. You could drink too much coffee. I drink too much coffee and it puts me to sleep. Anyway, Simon the Magus, he was in the city. He was doing his magic for everybody. And then here comes Paul and the disciples and they're in there and they're doing their works. You know what I mean? They're healing people. They're saving people. They're bringing people together in a way that he had been deceiving people for so long and using these, because these people maybe weren't educated or versed on a lot of the things that he knew. He knew information that they didn't know. And we can relate that to today's world and that we don't always see what's going on behind the scenes. My one grandson, we was at the laundromat the other day, and they'll always say, Grandpa, I want to see behind the scenes. I want to see behind the scenes. I was like, and they had like a baby gate up, and I was like, are you sure? Are you really sure you want to see behind the scenes? And he's like, yeah, I do, So I was like, all right. I said, but there's a gate there. And he's like, I don't care. I want to see behind the scenes. So anyway, I take him over there, right? And I was like, okay, are you ready? And he's like, yeah, I'm ready. And he looks in there, and all you see is the back of the dryers going down there, and with some pipes and plumbing and things like that in there. It's like, wow, demystified, to the mind of a child. His expectations may have been something more than that. I don't know, but that's all it was. And sometimes, we can deceive other people and we can deceive ourselves. You know what I mean? And this is like what a lot of people do. They use deception to manipulate, to control, to conceal information. It's sometimes like myself, I use sarcasm. It doesn't mean I'm lying. Oh, that's great. You know what I mean? Is I can say that, and you don't really know what I mean. To one person, they might say, "Oh, he must have been really bad." Another person would be like, "Wow, exciting! That's great news." Or that's great news. You know what I mean? And you have this whole thing, and this is the problem with people is perception. Um, you know, no magic to it. Other than um, we pick up on what other people, and the thing of it is why I'm relating it back to the time of Jesus is um, they didn't have all this technology that we have right now. At least not that I know of, but I don't know everything, And we have here that Jesus, he dies, he's resurrected, and then he spends time teaching the disciples, the 40 days or whatever, and then he goes and he ascends to be with the Father in heaven, and of course Jesus tells the disciples, stay in Jerusalem, don't go anywhere, just wait because um, I got something for you. That something was the Holy Spirit, the Spirit that moved through all of them, the Spirit that moves through all of us. And I think that there's this, a lot of people, they sat in church and they grew up maybe in a church or whatever, and they heard all the basics of how to live life or whatever. Like, this is what you do unto others the way you want to be treated, that an eye for an eye, Old Testament things, but it depends on how you're taking it, I guess. An eye for an eye, if you take an eye from someone else, you'd have to give up your eye. And kind of the way I'm looking at this right now is like, I might be, if I could just tell people what I see, the eye, the all-seeing eye that's doesn't see everything, you know, that we know things, and together, people being together or whatever. If I need something done or whatever, I don't know everything, and I need people, and the same thing is, somebody that knows everything, they can say, I'm God, I am my creator, I'm the creator of my life or whatever. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. The Bible says that we're born in labor, we're born in bondage, you know, and we're all slaves to one thing or another. But one thing, we're all slaves to our own mind. We're all slaves to our thought processes, patterns of recognition, and that's this thing. I am, or am I? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I strong enough? These are the doubts and everything that everybody has, and the other side of it is I'm great, I'm wonderful, I just look this way, and unfortunately, how we perceive ourselves is not how other people perceive us. And the problem is, it's kind of like this shared thing that we're all experience life together, and all our thoughts are projecting us through time, you know. So I think something, I'm in a room full of people, which makes it complicated. When you take a whole room full of people and you put them together, and you're trying to move ahead, you can move ahead, that's fine, and it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. But every single person in that room has got an experience that changes the way that they look at the now. Um, if you grew up in an abusive home, loud noises may bother you or affect you. If somebody raises their voice and they're stern, and you couldn't do the things, like if you controlled every aspect of somebody's life, then that wouldn't be free will. You might as well have a bunch of robots walking around, because it's either this or it's that. There is no third choice, fourth choice, or whatever. It's like, look, you can have cake or you can not have cake, you know. But the problem is, you walk into a store like my grandson, very hyper or whatever, and you put 100 choices in front of him, and that's us in life. Like, what are we going to do? What's the next thing we're going to do? I'm good at taking information as it comes in and kind of dividing it up, and decide making the decision based on that. And right, wrong, or indifferent, at a certain point, you get things that come in that you have to deal with. You're forced to deal with it. A loss, somebody in your family gets hurt, you hurt yourself. I love climbing trees, but I have injuries in that I deal with. And that was one of those things that, self-control, you can put uh, drugs in front of somebody that cover things up, they mask things up, but it doesn't deal with the root issue. Now, unfortunately, things like, vertebrae that are messed up, things like that, um, there's not much you can do about it. Now maybe science and technology. I know I went to a chiropractor one time, a while ago, a long, long while ago. And, you do something, you get yourself out of alignment. You're not in line with things. And that causes, like, you get a vertebrae pinched off, if it's not deteriorated or whatever, it causes pain, it sends a signal down because you have this electrical thing. I can show you the DNA and how DNA plays out. Like, all living things have got DNA in them. That's our genetic code, our sequencing that we have. And this code can become corrupted either by, now we have CRISPR technology where they can go in there and just cut a section of it out and add a section in or whatever. The problem is that it takes a while for these kind of changes to take place. And sometimes when you alter God's work, and you change that or whatever, you don't know what the end result is. A good example is my wife has problems with her hips. Now her mother was on a medication when she was pregnant or before she got pregnant, and it was to deal with her problems. But she didn't know what those medications, and I doubt the FDA or anybody else even knew at that time too. They weren't even as involved back then. I don't know as if they knew what the possible future would be, what the side effects. I got my one cousin, Doug, that he deals with things. He was in bars and all that, the night bars and all that stuff. For a child living in that, going through that or whatever, would have been a nightmare. You know what I mean? And again, you can take and make these connections, bars, night bars. And I could say night bars as in clubs, alcohol establishments, things like that. I don't know what his life is. I don't see him very much or whatever, but one thing that I dealt with was alcohol addiction and things like that within my family, and just anger issues and things like that. And there's always a root cause to these things that have happened in our past, whatever, that have to be dealt with before we can move on. We got to overcome issues. We got to get our brain straight and working with everything, because everything's got to work together for the good of God. And a lot of times you have, a lot of people don't have God in their life. They're just rebellious, because that's what we see, the rebellion. A lot of people look at, 13 is this unlucky number. It's this number of rebellion that you know we can rebel against God, we can rebel against our government, we can rebel against ourselves, you know. And that's generally what happens when we know it's wrong to steal, and I don't like to steal. I did uh, a couple times when I was younger or whatever, but I don't think I do now. I don't know when the last time I even thought about something like that was, but these experiences, shape our future, and there's a reason why the Bible, before you even come to Jesus in the Old Testament, it said, thou shalt not steal, and it made it pretty black and white. That just means, you know, now where you run into this area, if you're without food or money or resources, a lot of times people don't know what to do in them situations, so they don't think about what they do. They may, you know rob from somebody that's, right there next to them, or uh, sneak into some place or whatever, because they're trying to satisfy their needs without going through a process. And that process might be, I've got to humble myself and seek help, for these issues, these things that I need physically. We all need things physically. We need clothes and that. You can't just run around naked in public, because there's other people out in public that, maybe would want to uh, see that or whatever. And then you have the other group out there that says, like, I don't want to see that. You know what I mean? It's like that person needs clothes on now. I mean, this is an emergency situation. Get them a sheet or a towel or something like that. And it's not saying anything bad about them, but you know, it's even with our brain. There's certain aspects where privacy, we don't want everybody knowing our past, things that we've done, things that we're ashamed of. And that's the whole idea of coming to Christ, is that we come to Christ and we say, all right, I know, God, this is a big step. It's a big step, but I'm not perfect. I said it. I did it. I'm out there. It's out in the open. I've made mistakes. I've did things that I'm ashamed of, that I'm embarrassed of, that I don't want other people to know about. you know, and you know, what do you do? I know there's a lot of people in situations like that to where they have a past, and it doesn't matter. They may have spent their whole lifetime trying to overcome these things, live these things down, put these things behind them, but maybe some reason that they haven't faced them, you know, and come to Christ and said, I got to let it go. I got to let it go. The things that happened in the past, they're not good. They weren't good. Um, I played a part in whatever, but God, I'm Jesus. I've made mistakes. I've uh, I've hurt people. I've hurt myself. I've hurt other people, and I don't want to tell other people, but I want to deal with them within myself, and I want to have a new life. I want to be a new person. I want the past to magically go away. And Simon the Magus, he's watching all these miracles getting performed, and he's saying, I mean, he even went to him and said, "Here, I'll give you money. I'll give you money to show me what it is that you're doing. How are you doing all this stuff?" And the disciples are like, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about, you know, and we're just doing the right thing. We're doing what Jesus told us to, which is to love people and to, you know, feed my sheep, to build people up instead of trying to tear people down, and it's so easy to tear people down. It's so easy to try to intimidate or to use fear as a manipulation tool in order to sway things our way or get them to go our way, and there's no magic to that, to deceive and to lie to people or whatever. It's not a magic trick, you know, it's basically concealing things, to hide or to occult. That's what the word occult means, hidden, hidden knowledge. That means to not reveal, to not expose. We're in my mind, we're in the tribulation, the time of um, where we all go through some emotional things, and maybe that's because it's like, oh, I don't even know myself, much less to reveal myself to the world, to expose myself to the world, to talk about my past mistakes, my past sins. And, we don't need to confess them to everybody. It says if you confess yourself before man, you know, what that means is to say, hey, look, I messed up. Not everybody needs to know the details of all your whole life. You know what I mean? Um, I got my coffee here and I don't know what's in it. Maybe I don't want to know what's in it, but I do. I got this CBD oil here, and I could go down and I could get like a medical card through the government that says, I could, uh, get a vape pen that's got all kinds of chemicals and stuff in it, and it may have CBD oil in it. Sure, it may have THC in it, the psychoactive part or whatever. Um, but I don't know unless I actually pull out the data sheet, the MSDS sheet, and I scroll down like, oh, okay, it's got some of these proprietary things that we're not even allowed to know anyway. So even with all that information, God gives us, weed grows in the ground. You go out, you pick it up, and you smoke, and it's like, oh yeah, cool. And you don't see a whole lot of it. Probably most serial killers, whatever, you probably didn't see them like snapping out. It's like, oh my God, I just didn't get any weed. As a matter of fact, one time I was in Atlanta, and I wanted to get some weed, and I was just stressed out beyond belief, just stressed out. So I round up $10 or whatever, and I go down, and I basically get almost kind of like boxed in this alley or whatever. Um, I hit somebody like, hey, wait here. I'm going to go over here into this projects or whatever, and I'll get it and I'll bring it back or whatever. And so I'm sitting there 2 o'clock in the morning. Meanwhile, my wife and kids are back at the house, probably sleeping. Or they could have been worried to death about me, or maybe they was thinking maybe I get held hostage. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? Is we don't know all these things. But anyway, the situation I was in, I started getting a little uneasy and thinking like, man, I'm in the hood. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it was or whatever. And I went through all this stuff. I threw my butt for a $10 bag of weed, and I drove out in the middle of the night, and now I'm in a situation where I might lose my life, you know. And about the time, and I'll tell you, thank God that God is always with us or whatever, you know, I started getting this really uncomfortable feeling, and I said, it's time to go. So I started up the car, and I just as I'm pulling out or whatever, I see these other cars trying to kind of block me in, and I made it out, and I said, oh, thank God. And I got out, and I got home, and um, was thankful to be alive. And that's life. Sometimes we ought to be thankful. Just be thankful for what we have, thankful for what we can have, thankful for another day. You know, the things that we do have. I got a lot of things that I still need to deal with, and it's a process. And I forego those things to get out here to do a video or whatever that I'm not getting any money on. But if I can help one person by maybe sharing something from my past, or even just really sharing the word of God, the Bible, um, because it's got all these little life lessons that are so uh, valuable, that build us up, that, a lot of people that they can say, oh, the Bible and God and Jesus, this or whatever, but, you know, my question is like, how much have they ever really dug into it? And that's one thing is that I could go to a library just loaded with books and books and books and, all kinds of knowledge or whatever. And there is a lot of knowledge out there, but I've seen, when I was younger, I was going to get mental health books, to try to figure out what was wrong with me, why my life was crazy and the madness and all that. And I would read, Vince Lombardi and Norman Vincent Peale, just like all these people or whatever. And it would just amaze me how the Bible could capture the essence of a complete book within a couple verses. And, that's kind of when I fell in love with the Bible and I fell in love with God. And it was just like, man, God is talking to me, you know, and that's what why I make these videos and things like that, is that hopefully for somebody, they might pick up a book, you know, hopefully the good book. There's a lot of other good books out there, but that don't have near as much content, depth, and then, when you look at the full armor of God, you have the helmet of salvation. That's the salvation that we get from Jesus Christ. The armor that we wear. Righteousness of doing the right thing, of trying to live a righteous life. Like a righteous dude. Or the truth, the belt of truth. You know what I mean? That when we're living in the truth and we can be honest with ourselves and other people or whatever, we don't have to worry about the stuff in the past or whatever. If we're questioned about it, it's like, hey, this is what I did. You know, it's what I did. It's what I do. It's who I am. You know, if you don't like it, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. You know, I'm gonna have people that love me, people that hate me, people that kind of don't know about me. You know, and that's fine. You know, because they got their life that they got to live. They got their viewpoints in the world, and I'm not going to shove the Bible down somebody's throat. I don't want to force help on somebody. I want to help you out. No, just go away. You know, we want to keep things the way they are because it's comfortable, it's nice, it's warm. It doesn't mean it's the best. It just means that sometimes people are afraid to get past their comfort zone. And just like coffee isn't all that great to me, I like tea too, and juice and other things or whatever. But these are things that life we each get a life to live. We each have, as parents, we're responsible for our children. And if people do things to our children that, when we're not there, we have little control of it. But when you have a child that don't want to, you can say, honey, look, you're going to be abducted if you run around in your underwear at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, like the neighbor kids at the last place I lived. It's kind of like, and I would see these kids and just think, oh my God, I just feel so sad for them. That nobody's watching them. And even as I watch my kids, like, we don't know what happens to them when they're out of our sight. We trust the schools, we trust the doctors, we trust all these people in charge of uh, lives and that. And the thing of it is when we sign little pieces of paper, whatever, a lot of times we do it without thinking very much or whatever, and that gives them rights to do what they want, and we hope and we trust that they're doing the best things for them. We don't know that, but there's a good judge of what's happening to them if we sit down and we listen to them. That's why family meals and things like that used to be so important, because you'd say, hey, what happened, how was your day, and when you get that feedback from the little ones, the ones that are going to be our future, and they say, yeah, my teacher did this to me or whatever, sometimes you got to call everybody together and say, you know, this is what was said, this is what happened, this is what's going on. Uh, what's the deal? Why is this going on, or why is this being said? And I have a lot of questions like that right now, and I'm trusting in God that He's gonna, work things out. Uh, but I do, if you read the Bible, you already know what the end of it is, you know, and people can look to their prophets, they can look to their seers, they can look to these, but they really don't have to, because we all have the same book that we can read, and it's got the same ending in it. Now how you view that ending, your life might be full of tribulation, it may be full of revelation, you know, man, I don't know. Um, but anyway, that's the thing, is that lying to people, cheating people, stealing from people, and not facing up to the things that you've done in your past, which I'm making this video here, and I've got so many other things to do. I've got to deal with, past landlords, current landlords, things that need to be addressed, and to make my life better, to make my kids' life better, my wife the life better, my neighborhood, because it goes on and on and on, and all the way up to our federal government and to the world governments, the world people that are in charge. That's what the Bible talks about: powers, principalities, rulers. Is we've got people that are in charge. God set up this way of legislation and laws, that we can see in the Bible, and that gets transferred over to, us, the people, who, with our input, we're the ones that determine what happens, what goes on. But it's more than that. Even in a community, you can take a depressed community, and you can see the spirit of that community. If it's a spirit of happiness, of togetherness, of working together for a common goal, you can see that. If you have a community that's got the spirit of chaos, confusion, of madness, or whatever, you can see that spirit well at work right there. And then it's hard to live in, it's hard to work in, it's hard to even to drive through an area like that, because you have all this chaos. And how do we get this, order out of chaos? Though is Christ is the one that brings us into line, brings us into focus, brings us into this state to where instead of tearing each other down and trying to manipulate and cheat and steal and rob and all these things, and that's what Jesus says, the thief comes to rob, steal, and destroy. And that's what somebody that comes in to steal your rights, to steal your beliefs, to steal your uh, children, you know. And I'm not saying that I've had a bad experience with the CYS, and that doesn't mean everybody else is going to. It doesn't mean that there's not problems in your local level, but that's why we have a state level. That's why we have a federal level. Is that these things can be dealt with, and they can work their way up the ladder. And sometimes it takes a long time. You know, somebody that has a civil suit against somebody else or whatever, they may, um, and that's where you have this family thing. Is it starts right there. One of the things I'm thankful for my wife for is that she didn't always give in to me when I wanted my way. You know, my way a lot of times is the wrong way. So it takes that whole unit and learning to function as a unit. And then people would say, like a military unit, you can control them, and you have this way of doing it or whatever, but they have to be working together for a common good. And again, that's why I go back to, you have this one Magus in the group, Simon, that's just like, show me the way, and all they're saying is like, look, I mean, they probably wanted to give him a hug and say, dude, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Because, that's what the Bible talks about, this peace. What I mean is we don't want to break people's spirits down. We want to build their spirits up, give them this power to create, to excel, to learn, to grow. And, when we take that away from them, whether that's through force, manipulation, um, whatever, we're the ones ultimately responsible. Each person has got to take responsibility for their own actions, you know, and then it kind of moves up the ladder. We should be responsible for teaching our kids, and that's hard to do. I'm not an educator. I know a lot of things or whatever, but there should be like a system set in place. And it's even like me and my wife talking about the cyber schooling, and that is end result is we already know that, just me sitting in front of this computer as much as I do, it's probably going to cause a cancer or something like that. Or if the power goes out and the electric grid goes down or something like that, now what are we looking for? We don't know what to do. Like 2 + 2. Oh my goodness! I got to get all the batteries dead on my calculator. Oh, we're in trouble. You know, sometimes we learn through repetition, through writing it out, through speaking it out. A lot of the stories that we have come through verbal, you know, cave paintings, rock paintings, and technology is great. It's wonderful. And maybe you could speed learn through technology or whatever. But I noticed with my one grandson that spends a lot of time on the computers and that or whatever, his memory is so jumbled, it's mixed up, it's very confused. I shut the Wi-Fi off, and he acts even further behind than my other grandson that's not exposed to it as much. So what do you do? What's the answer? You know, I don't know, but it's not magic. It's not magic how people have learned for centuries and millennium, and um, And it's not magic that we've had a book that's united the world. And it's not magic when we see that when Christ come into the picture, that the world either become unified underneath him in the Christian faith, or you had the haters out there that said, no. I mean, even the Muslims, a lot of them, when you look at that, they say that Allah was the father of lies. I could think of another character in literature that meets that criteria, but they recognize Jesus, but they pretty much didn't recognize him as the Son of God. He was just a wizard, a prophet, a whatever. So that's that division again. And we can either, everybody can kind of unite under one common goal. One policy manual, the Bible, or not. And at that point, it's like, oh, here, hey, Jesus, look, we want you to do the right thing here, which is, listen to me. You got your own mind, input, whatever, but don't use that because we know better than you, or life is complicated and crazy. I know that. But anyway, that's my little Bible parable about Simon the Magus or whatever, and the disciples. The disciples worked together. Jesus told them, basically, hey, don't take a lot of clothes, stuff like that. Go out there, preach the word or whatever. And when you get to a town that don't want to hear the word of God, stop your feet and move on, because you know what? It's going to be worse for them in that day. So that's what the Bible says. And with that, I would say, Heavenly Father, we just pray that this message gets received in love, truth, honesty, and just work on people, Lord, and get your message out there. In Jesus' name, amen.